Math was my favorite subject, I suppose, at school, but on the other hand, I was interested in this electronics. So I thought I'd do physics as being a compromise between the two. It wasn't. It was something completely different, I realized. There was a lot, the philosophy of physics is different. And I think physics is pretty special. And I'm glad that I did do it. But did not prepare me, it did not turn me into a mathematician, and it did not really allow me to do electronics. It was allowed me to do it, but I think in all sorts of interesting ways, and realize that the relationship between the microscopic and the microscopic rules of behavior of atoms and the macroscopic behavior of the gas and so on is really interesting. And that difference is now crucial between the microscopic way in which two computers interact over the network and the way the whole web behaves, which we're now calling web science. The difference between the microscopic and the macroscopic is still the challenge.
This is just how deep into physics do the roots of our consciousness go? And what's happening today, a growing number of scientists are comfortable with the idea that quantum mechanics plays a key role in brain processes, especially those associated with consciousness. And there are a number of specific proposals as to how quantum mechanics may play a role in the brain deep within the neuron, where there are structures, perhaps microtubules, which are of a size and structure that quantum mechanics may be important, and frequencies of consciousness, both of which go through an elaborate internal dynamics as they prepare to give rise to the material universe on the one hand, or thought on the other. And that incredible structure, by the way, is mirrored in our brain, in the central nervous system, which has interesting implications we could talk about some other yuga.
The way quantum mechanics works is you have a very important role is played by observers. And observers ask questions about what their experiences are going to be, and nature answers yes or no to a question posed by the observer about what his experience is going to be. So the whole thing is lodged in the realm of experience to begin with. And this state of this quantum state, which is the physically described aspect of the observer's awareness and experience, is because it's physically described, there's a tendency for people to think that it's material, matter-like, but that's not the case. It has this quality of being what's called Aristotelian potentia. That's a possibility for what your experience might be. And so the observer asks the question, is my experience going to be such and such? And this is immediately answered by nature, yes or no, your experience will be the one you just described. And this is lodged into the ontological reality.
At the heart of the technology is this photonics chip. Whatever you do, don't call it a lens. Magic Leap won't, and it says it won't disclose what the final goggles will look like, or even if they're goggles.
It's a three-dimensional wafer-like component that has very small structures in it, and they manage the flow of photons that ultimately create a digital light field signal.
The scientists who invented quantum theory shifted viewpoint. They said, well, what really exists, the only thing we really know exists, is our own experience. Our experience, and if we're human beings, we can communicate our experience. So there's something called our knowledge that plays an important role in the description of quantum theory. There's our knowledge, which is an objective thing, but it's made up of the knowledge of all of the individual peoples. So this is the objective reality of quantum theory, and it's knowledge-based.
And it was designed in order to make it possible to get at documentation, and in order to be able to get people, students working with me, contributing to the project, for example, to be able to come in and link in their ideas so that we wouldn't lose it all if we didn't debrief them before they left, and so that people could, really it was designed to be a collaborative workspace for people to design a large system together.
Let's talk about what a credential is, right? So a credential is basically a qualification or achievement, a quality or piece of information about your background, such as a name or a government ID, a payment provider, a home address, or a university degree. So a credential is basically a set of information that's associated with you. There are many different types of credentials, as you know, passports, shipping addresses, driver's licenses, ID cards, prizes that you've won. And what we're trying to do is figure out a way to get all of these credentials onto the web. So before we really get into the rest of this, let's talk about how we're going to associate these credentials with you. Right? So a lot of this technology that we're talking about is built on top of this concept of linked data. There are some other tutorials out there on JSON-LD and linked data signatures that you should really take a look at because they cover a lot of the foundational concepts that we're going to talk about in this video. So the idea here is that if we're going to assign credentials to you, we need to give you some kind of identifier on the web. And the easiest way to give you an identifier is to just assign a URL to you. By assigning a URL to you, what we enable is the ability to then assign other pieces of information to you. And we can start effectively linking credentials to your persona online. At the top here we have our JSON-LD context, and right now we're basically reusing the identity JSON-LD context. Identity and credentials are fairly closely interlinked, and so the identity JSON-LD context has basically everything that we need in it to express a credential. The next thing that we have is the ID of the credential itself. Now the ID of the credential allows us to look up that credential at any time in the future. So for example, if we want to see if the credential is still valid, or if we want to read other metadata about the credential, we can go to this URL and read that information. The third piece of information here is the type of credential. So there are many different types of credentials: passport credentials, driver's license credentials, email credentials, shipping address credentials, billing address or payment provider credentials. There are many different types of credentials that can exist in the world. But the one thing that's common across all of these credentials is that they each have a set of claims. Now the set of claims that's associated with the credential is basically what this credential is saying about you. The digital signature lets the receiver of the credential understand that it's not just Jane making these statements about herself. It's actually a government of some kind making the claims about Jane. So overall, this is basically what a credential looks like. Now, what the claims in the credential allow us to do is they allow us to state things about other things out there on the internet and in the real world. Right? It allows organizations to make claims about people. It allows people to make claims about organizations. It allows organizations to make claims about animals. All kinds of different claims can be made in this huge web of linked data that we have. And that's a really powerful concept.
You may consider this next group of speakers somewhat unusual, if not to say strange. We have the creator of what is the world's first quantum computer, in person here from Burnaby, BC. We have the president of the super high-tech company that makes Canada's iconic Canada Arm, but whose hobby it is to try and reconcile modern science with the Bible. And we have a filmmaker from Los Angeles who has stumbled on what appears to be evidence of life after death. And my thought in putting together this somewhat improbable combination of speakers was that out there where the theory of the very large and the very small connect, and out there where our 13.7 billion year old and expanding universe touches the void, you come upon mystery and the possibility of God. That was my thinking. So let's begin with Jordy. Jordy. Jordy, I don't understand much about quantum computing except that it's supposed to be the next big thing in power and in speed, and that you are the only company in the world now actually making one.
Well, hopefully after this 17 minutes, you'll understand what they are and be excited about what you might be able to use them for. This quote is from a respectable scientist, in fact, one of the founders of this field, that may look a little strange to you who don't follow theoretical physics, but there is a very clear prediction that our most successful theory of nature makes, and that is that there are an enormous number, mind-bogglingly large number, of parallel realities, as real as this one, that have different consistent histories. So imagine a world where all of the laws of physics as we know them are obeyed, but different decisions were made along the way. Different decisions at the level of tiny microscopic particles, different decisions all the way up to what you chose to eat for lunch, and whether you chose to come to this session or not. Quantum mechanics makes a very specific prediction that all of those are as real as the thing that you remember. And this is bizarre, because we don't see those other things. But science has reached the point now where we can build machines that exploit those other worlds. And quantum computers are perhaps the most exciting of all of these that we have within, or almost within our grasp right now. So people from a physics background love this. They want to understand the world. They want to understand the universe, how it all works. There's another type of person who tends to come from the computer science side that's like, yeah, okay, that's all great. But there's a different thing going on here, which is just as exciting, if not more, and that these machines that supposedly can do this wild stuff, let's forget about how they work, if you could build one, could solve problems that you could never, ever solve with any computer of the sort that we built. If you took every single atom of silicon in the world and made the most sophisticated conventional Intel-style processor that you could build, there are problems we know of that I could write down on a sheet of paper that you could never, ever, ever solve with that thing, that you could with this kind of machine. So that's very exciting. Humans use tools to do things. If you give humans a new kind of tool that can do things that you couldn't otherwise do, imagine the possibilities.
So we've heard, in this session a lot about some cool new hardware, and I really look forward to getting my hands on some of this hardware that's being built. But it's my belief that actually to crack intelligence, we are going to need some big algorithmic breakthroughs as well as hardware advances. So in this talk, I'm going to be talking about software and algorithms rather than hardware. So AI is really the science of making machines smart. And basically, there's two ways of doing this. One is that you can pre-program a solution into the computer and have the computer sort of dumbly but efficiently execute that solution. A second way is that, in fact, you could teach machines, give them the ability to learn for themselves how to solve a particular task. And it's that second type of artificial intelligence that we're interested in and we're working on at DeepMind.
What sort of web do you want? I want one which is not fragmented into lots of pieces, as some countries have been suggesting they should do in reaction to the recent surveillance. I want a web which has got, for example, is a really good basis for democracy. I want a web where I can use healthcare with privacy and where there's a lot of health data, clinical data is available to scientists to do research. I want a web where the other 60% get on board as fast as possible. I want a web which is such a powerful basis for innovation that when something nasty happens, some disaster strikes, then we can respond by building stuff to respond to it very quickly. So those are just some of the things that I want. I mean, from a big list, obviously it's longer. You have your list. I want us to use this 25th anniversary to think about what sort of a web we want.
We're not against the technology in itself. That is not the subject of the debate tonight. Jaron talked about the separation of church and state. We talked about this over lunch today. What I think he means is that we need to separate the science from the belief. And all too often in this enormously important debate about whether or not we should trust the promise of artificial intelligence, of smart machines that are indeed so smart that they replicate us as a species, both collectively and individually, Jaron is arguing that we're muddling them up. Jaron is arguing that there's too much state in the church and too much church in the state. And the philosophers are intervening. The philosophers are telling us that this science is good, is moral, is liberating. And that's, I think, the argument that our team is making, or certainly that I am making, is that there's a problem not with the technology, but with its promise, with the ideology.
The people who were crucial to the pickup of the web were, for example, people in companies who probably had day jobs but were doing this out of interest, engineers who were picking it up. If there had been patents around it, their lawyers would have told them not to even read the code, not to download it, not to install it, not to read anything about it, in case they were tainted by something which would allow the company later to be sued. So, similarly, somebody else in their garage, their basement, just doing it for fun. They're doing it because they think it would be really exciting. Because they share the twinkle in their eye. They understand what it would be like if everybody had a web server, or everybody had a web page, and everybody had a web browser. So they're just going to do, some of the people who do it because it would be cool if everybody did. Everybody realized that these new markets, these new spaces, these new ideas there will be new spaces of things in which other things will be built, but they will depend on the basic web infrastructure being royalty-free. It's always been like that. Every now and again, we've had a hiccup when somebody didn't understand it, when somebody thought that maybe they try to make a quick killing by somehow getting a stranglehold on it, somehow finding a way to be able to limit your access, everybody's access to the web, and then they'd be able to charge for it. Yeah, and and you could see that they had a different gleam in their eyes, but rapidly they found that really people treated them with the utmost contempt and programmed around them, went around them, and left them having learned a lesson and generally picking up the pieces and moving on and joining this world of openness, of open standards.
For the last 1,000 years, our mothers and our fathers, have been struggling for freedom of thought. We have sustained many horrible losses and some immense victories. And we are now at a very serious time. Our network assumes that you can be tracked everywhere. And we've taken the web and we've made Facebook out of it. We put one man in the middle of everything. We live our social lives, our private lives in the web, and we share everything with our friends and also with our super friend. We are creating a media that consume us, and media loves it. The primary purpose of 21st century commerce is to predict how we can be made to buy. And the thing that people most want us to buy is debt. So we are going into debt. We're getting heavier. Heavier with debt, heavier with doubt, heavier with all we need we didn't know we needed until they told us we were thinking about it, because they owned the search box and we put our dreams in it. Everything we want, everything we hope, everything we'd like, everything we wish we knew about is in the search box, and they own it. Why waste time and money having buildings full of little men who check who's in which photographs? Just tell everybody to tag their friends and bing, you're done. Once upon a time, the technological mistakes were mistakes. We made them. They were the unintended consequences of our thoughtful behavior. That's not the way it is right now. The things that are going wrong are not mistakes, they're designs. They have purpose. And the purpose is to make the human population readable. We used to say we would keep information on people not suspected of anything for only 180 days maximum. We're changing that a little bit to 5 years, which is infinity. So I was having a conversation with a senior government official I have known all these many years who works in the White House. And I said, "You're changing American society." He said, "Well, we realize that we need a robust social graph of the United States." I said, "You need a robust social graph of the United States?" "Yes," he said. I said, "You mean the United States government is from now on going to keep a list of everybody every American knows? Do you think by any chance that should require a law?" And he just laughed, because they did it in a press release in the middle of the night on Wednesday when it was raining. We're going to live in a world, unless we do something quickly, in which our media consume us and spit in the government's cup. There will never have been any place like it before. And if we let it happen, there will never be any place different from it again. Humanity will all have been wired together, and media will consume us and spit in the government's cup. And the state will own our minds.
There are governments, and there have been governments for ways that have tried to limit access to information. I think it's a slow process, but I think it's inexorable. That connectivity it slowly extends itself. People want it desperately themselves, individually. Governments realize bit by bit that actually having communication is very important for the economic well-being of a country. People realize that that trying to filter things is a losing battle. It sets you up for being, it makes the people who you filter out so much more energized and motivated to try to get around the censorship. So I don't think it's something which a country can change overnight. But I think that we're seeing it change inexorably, and so I'm optimistic about censorship.
Human rights. What are human rights? Well, human rights are the values which keep society fair, just and equal. They protect children, the elderly, people in care, victims of domestic violence, people with mental health problems, religious groups, teachers, soldiers, and, yes, prisoners. They protect all of us. They protect you. Our human rights are protected by law. That means we can do something if our rights are attacked. But not everyone loves human rights. Some want to water them down, even scrap them. Our rights are under threat, so it's time to get educated. Societies used to be controlled by all-powerful rulers who could be horribly unjust. Kings only gave rights to people they liked. Over thousands of years, people fought for equality, and with every hard-won right came new laws that improved how we lived. But in the 20th century, brutal dictators came to power. They ruled by fear, like the kings of the past. Those hard-won rights, they were dismantled on an unimaginable scale. After World War II, the democracies got together and said, never again. They created a simple document setting out the basic rights we all need to live a dignified life. The European Convention puts rights, not rulers, at the heart of our society. Like the right to life, to liberty, to free speech.
Well, I mean, I think my sort of full position would require quite a long explanation. I mean, I am concerned about certain directions that AI could take that would be not good for the future. I mean, I think it would be fair to say that, like, not all AI futures are benign. Not all.
Okay.
And so if you have something, if we create some digital superintelligence that exceeds us in every way by a lot, it's very important that that be benign. So OpenAI has a very high sense of urgency, and I think that the people that have joined are really, really amazing. And the intent with OpenAI is to democratize AI power. And there's a quote that I love from Lord Acton. He was the guy that came up with power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, which is that freedom consists of the distribution of power and despotism in its concentration. And so I think it's important, if we have this incredible power of AI, that it not be concentrated in the hands of a few and potentially lead to a world that we don't want.
And that thing is like flight. It gives these computers access to these new resources, maybe you could call them parallel universes, in order to do something that you couldn't otherwise do. And that's not the only one. In fact, the one I'm going to come back to and talk to in the context of the story that I'm wrapping this in was recently installed at NASA. And Google was the primary interested party that pulled this whole thing together. And this one is really exciting to me, because what they're going to do is apply this machine to an area that I think is fundamentally important. It's a crux of our future as humans, and that's, can we build machines like us? So building machines like us might be possible. I certainly believe it is. I might be wrong. But what I do know is that the types of approaches that people are taking now to build intelligent machines benefit immensely from what this machine that we've built does best. So what this center is about is applying this beautiful new computational idea in the service of trying to make intelligent machines. Now, I can't think of anything personally any cooler than trying to use quantum computers to build intelligent machines, so this is very exciting to me.
What's remarkable is not the answer, but the way the computer does it. The quantum chip considers every possible solution, all at the same time, instead of sequentially.
And you're collapsing to this one answer that will actually be the answer you're after, right? Which is a huge speed up, that you kind of explore all of these possible places and possible answers, and you get the one that you want.
Eric's proved that quantum computing has the potential to smash the codes that protect the internet.
It blows the doors off of RSA encryption, right? All we need is more and more qubits. We just need a larger quantum computer.
If you have a quantum computer, then you can use it to factor numbers. Factoring numbers enables you to break the codes that are making the internet work. You could read everybody's email that they're trying to keep secret and learn their credit card numbers and all sorts of secrets, state secrets that are being passed between computers. Of course, if everyone knows that quantum computers are developed, they'll stop using these codes and start using other ones, which will be inconvenient, but won't really destroy civilization.
Here we are at a situation where the internet was designed to be basically decentralized. We can talk about that in detail. And Vince gone into some of the issues there with DNS. And the web was designed to be decentralized, so everybody can make that. Everybody could participate by having their own domain and having their own web server. And this wasn't how. And in fact, we've got a situation where individual personal data has been locked up in these silos. And there is, and one of the features of the last few years is that if you read the trade press, you read magazines, the first thing you get at the top of a lot of the articles, and certainly anything in the marketing world, is you get the assumption, they say, well, the world today is one where the consumer gets a whole lot of things for free. And the deal that consumer has done is that they sold their soul of their privacy in order to get those things for free. And in fact, when they sell it, they give away the privacy to the machine, to the marketing system, to whoever it is that eventually gets the data that has been captured by you in all these many ways. And what happens to that allows them to suddenly get targeted with all kinds of things. It becomes impossible to let that person not let you not know that you're pregnant, so you end up getting, and your child ends up getting things for the rest of their life, knowing from just when your buying patterns switch from going out a lot needing to buying diapers, or you buy the first crib, because the system actually makes a huge amount of use of that data, which people find suddenly a little bit creepy. But the assumption is that, but yeah, everybody's happy with that. That is the deal. They're not totally happy with that, but you know, they're so happy to get search for free and news for free that's how it works. And the only way to make advertising on the net at the moment, is to make money, is through advertising. So, what's wrong with this picture? What's wrong with this picture is that, I think start with that whole the deal that consumer gone through. I put it to you, it's a myth. It's a myth that it has to be. I think it's a myth that everybody's happy with it, and I think it's a myth that it's optimal. I put it to you that the value of the data to me is much greater than the value of the data to anybody else. So the proposal is then to bring back the idea of a decentralized web, bring back power to people. The things we're doing at MIT and various other organizations involve just breaking that model where all your data is in different silos. It involves we have a project, for example, which is called Solid, which involves having a standard so that when I get my Fitbit data, whatever it is, I can put it in my own storage, I can put it in cloud storage that I control. And so we are thinking we're going to make a social revolution by just tweaking. We're going to use web technology, but we're going to use it in a way that we can separate the apps that you use from the data that you use, and so that I can control my data. Imagine I have a place to keep my data, so whenever I run any app, it will store data in places that I control, and as a result, when I run something like a lifestyle app, it doesn't just get access to the things in one silo, like my friend's management app doesn't just get access to the stuff in my Facebook silo, it gets access to my whole life. And it gets access to the pieces of other people's lives that I should be happy to share with. So that's the way in which we're proposing, tweaking the architecture a little bit, but dramatically changing the way it's used socially.
Okay, so every time I'm asked to talk about the future of the web, the future of search, I realize now I end up talking about the past. Maybe it's because my dad was a history teacher, I don't know. But my background was digital libraries, so the GLAM stuff, the library stuff, the museum stuff, it's just beautiful. It's really exciting work. And the New York Times, Yahoo News, it's all coming together. And what I want to try and do is tell a story about how really these things connect up. That when we look back at something like the origins of our news, the origins of schema.org, as technologists, we tend to look back, to 2006, maybe 1999, maybe 96, 97, when I got involved. As I've dug back further, I've tended to introduce the semantic web by pointing people to Tim Berners-Lee's original design for the web, which came from back in the 80s, 1989. The more I read, the more I learn, the further back it goes. And I've set myself the probably impossible task of covering 100 years of search, connecting libraries, media, and the semantic web as a way of describing what we're doing in schema.org, what's new about schema.org, and what's, part of a much longer story. And wherever possible, we'll plug in existing vocabularies rather than make them up. So for country codes, we'll look to the UN. The food and agriculture guys there have a geopolitical ontology. And to Wikipedia and to DBpedia. I talked already, I think, enough about process. The oversight remains with the 4 companies that lead this, but we do more and more at W3C. The Web Schemas group is the place to be, and we'll be starting Telecom shortly. So we're making it up as we go along in the best possible way.
Controversy over whether or not to police fake news stories on social media platforms like Facebook. In the aftermath of the election, employees there are now reportedly taking on CEO Mark Zuckerberg over this very issue. NBC national correspondent Miguel Almaguer is at Facebook headquarters in Menlo Park, California, with more on that. Miguel, good morning to you.
Hey, Matt, good morning. It's believed more than 60% of Americans get their news from social media websites, and Facebook is the world's most powerful social media platform. But now the company's CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, is reportedly under fire within the company for not doing enough to take fake news stories off the site.
The headlines are as shocking as they are fake. ISIS oil king paid off Hillary Clinton. Pope Francis endorses Trump. Now growing concern these fake stories may have had real influence on voters. Google announced it's taking steps to ban fake news stories from its site. The company telling the BBC.
From our perspective, there should just be no situation in which fake news gets distributed.
Facebook clarified it already prohibits ads, saying, "Our team will continue to closely vet all prospective publishers and monitor existing ones." But just days ago, CEO Mark Zuckerberg said he didn't want the company to become the arbiter of truth.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is speaking out against the idea that fake news on the social network influenced the U.S. presidential election.
Along with Barack Obama, another big winner in the presidential elections, social media and networking sites, YouTube, Facebook, and MySpace. All were unknown or non-existent in the previous election, but took center stage in the 2008 vote. Lee Brenner is the political director at MySpace.
I think that by appealing to this demographic, this young, independent-minded demographic, both candidates kind of solidified their voice in the campaign. Senator Obama has been, enormously successful on MySpace. He has, one official national MySpace page, but he has one official page for every one of the states as well as every constituency group.
By the end of the campaign, Barack Obama had over 800,000 friends on MySpace, John McCain over 200,000. On Facebook, users were able to donate their Facebook status, a message to friends about what they're up to vote for a candidate or simply to get out the vote. Just one way supporters used the sites to influence their peers, creating a tricky peer pressure situation for those whose political views may not have aligned with their friends.
Speaking at Techonomy's annual conference in Half Moon Bay, just south of San Francisco, he pushed back against critics who say Facebook let false information run rampant on its site and that its algorithm tended to amplify the voices people wanted to hear instead of providing a full picture of what was going on. He told our Bloomberg contributing editor David Kirkpatrick that echo chambers aren't really a problem on the site.
Please welcome the co-founder of PayPal and first investor in Facebook, entrepreneur Peter Thiel.
Good evening. I'm Peter Thiel. I build companies and I support people who are building new things, from social networks to rocket ships. I'm not a politician, but neither is Donald Trump. He is a builder, and it's time to rebuild America.
Choice of law clauses in contracts are very common. In fact, so common that they're standard in most contracts. And they are what their name implies. They are an agreement or stipulation between the contracting parties to designate the law of a particular jurisdiction that will govern the interpretation and, in the event of a dispute, govern the resolution of that dispute. Don't wait until a problem arises in your contract to consult a lawyer about choice of law clauses. I would recommend that you do it when you're contemplating negotiating a contract, because unless you have a lawyer who can advise what the effect of the choice of a particular state's laws would be on the contract, you're flying blind. You need a lawyer there to counsel you on what the laws will mean. And if they aren't to your liking, it may prompt you to negotiate different terms for your contract.
I want you to meet Tech Bro. His name is Justin Keller. He's a tech entrepreneur. He has a company called Commando.io, and he is not very happy about the homeless problem in San Francisco. He was so incensed over the holiday weekend when his parents came to visit him and they were accosted, to use his words, by homeless people, that he wrote an open letter to the mayor and to the police chief condemning the city and saying that really he didn't want to have to deal with the riffraff. He didn't want to have to deal with the homeless. This is what he said, or part of what he said. It was a long letter, but I'm going to read a couple of excerpts just to get a sense of his frustration, and then we can talk about it. He said, "The wealthy working people, of which I'm assuming he thinks he is one, have earned their right to live in the city. They went out, got an education, worked hard, and earned it. I shouldn't have to worry about being accosted. I shouldn't have to see the pain, struggle, and despair of homeless people to and from my work, my way to work every day. I want my parents, when they come to visit, to have a great experience and enjoy this special place." So, A, for insensitivity. Listen, he is touching on a very real problem in San Francisco, the number of homeless. But as a member of the tech community, he says that part of his authority for doing this is, "I've lived here for 3 years," he says. "I've lived here for 3 years, and I don't want to have to see this."
It's almost Super Bowl time here in the U.S., and Americans across the country are getting ready, making fattening foods, buying new TVs, stocking up on corporate beer, and hiding all of their homeless. Because who wants to see homeless people when all you want to think about is the big game?
If you read science fiction, you might think that humans in the future will be slender, short, bald, with big heads and big eyes. That's sort of the stereotype that you get from the comic books. However, you have to realize that as far as gross evolutionary pressure is concerned, there is none anymore on the human race. For example, in the old days, when we lived in the forest, there were enormous selection pressures placed on us to develop a large brain, to understand how to use tools, to run, to be able to navigate, to survive in the forest. Enormous pressures on us, because if you were not fit to live in the forest, you died. And so your genes are not here today. But how much evolutionary pressure is being placed on us today? Well, first of all, there are no more Australias. Australia is a continent that broke off from the other continents, and it evolved very rapidly because it diverged from the rest of the evolutionary tree. There are no more Australias anymore. In this sense, we have jet airplanes. You can go pretty much anywhere on the planet Earth, meet people, have children, and your genes are now spread throughout the planet Earth. We no longer have any isolated pockets like Australia, which would accelerate human evolution.
The question is, how do scientists view these deeper questions that we're kind of trying to get into now? And there's a famous quote by Feynman, Richard Feynman, who said, "I don't understand quantum mechanics, and I don't think anybody understands quantum mechanics." And he's talking to his students at Caltech, and if you can possibly help it, don't try, because if you do, you'll go down the drain just like everybody else who ever tried. So that's kind of the attitude of most scientists, that this problem of consciousness, we know how the way that quantum mechanics was formulated at the beginning of the 20th century was in terms of a set of practical rules that work. And those rules allowed you to explain how your experiences were organized. And the way it was structured, it brought your experience into human experience into the dynamics. And that was the real change. Human experience was brought into dynamics. You often hear that the observer was brought into physics by quantum mechanics, but it was not a passive observer. The observer, in some sense, was always there. Somehow, we were somehow aware of what was happening. The whole dynamics, according to classical ideas, was a mechanical clockwork universe that somehow we were aware of. And quantum mechanics brought the human being into science not only as an observer, a passive observer, what was going on, but as an agent.
We think about intelligence in this very generalized fashion. And in fact, we think of intelligence in the framework of what's called reinforcement learning. And I just want to briefly describe to you what reinforcement learning is in this simple schematic. So on the left-hand side here, we have the AI system. We call them agents at DeepMind. And this agent finds itself in some kind of environment, and it's trying to achieve a goal in that environment. Now, that environment could be the real world, or it could be a virtual environment. Doesn't matter. Now, the agent only interacts with the environment in two ways. So the first way is that it gets observations about the environment through its sensory apparatus. And we normally use vision, but you could use other sensory modalities. Now, the key thing is these observations are always noisy and incomplete. So it's not like a game of chess where you know the full state of the board at all moments in time. The real world is much more messy and complex than that. There are many things you cannot directly observe. So the agent system is built from the ground up to deal with this noisy, unexpected, uncertain environment. And the first job of the agent system is to build the best approximate model it can of the world out there, based on these noisy, incomplete observations, and to update that model every time a new observation comes in.
Computer science. Yes, we have prototype cars that can drive by themselves, but without smart vision, they cannot really tell the difference between a crumbled paper bag on the road, which can be run over, and a rock that size, which should be avoided. We have made fabulous megapixel cameras, but we have not delivered sight to the blind. Drones can fly over massive land, but not enough vision technology can help us to track the changes of the rainforests. Security cameras are everywhere, but they do not alert us when a child is drowning in a swimming pool. Photos and videos are becoming an integral part of global life. They're being generated at a pace that's far beyond any human or teams of humans could hope to view. And you and I are contributing to that at this TED. Yet our most advanced software are still struggling at understanding and managing this enormous content. So in other words, collectively as a society, we're very much blind because our smartest machines are still blind. Why is this so hard, you might ask? Cameras can take pictures like this one by converting lights into a two-dimensional array of numbers known as pixels. But these are just lifeless numbers. They do not carry meaning in themselves. Just like to hear is not the same as to listen. To take pictures is not the same as to see. And by seeing, we really mean understanding. In fact, it took Mother Nature 540 million years of hard work to do this task. And much of that effort went into developing the visual processing apparatus of our brains, not the eyes themselves. So vision begins with the eyes, but it truly takes place in the brain.
Does Magic Leap do it?
Your brain is like a graphics processor, and we basically tried to clone what that signal is. We made a digital version of that, and we talked to the GPU of the brain.
Wired tried it, and it is amazing. Mountains appear to grow out of tables, and schools of jellyfish float on ceilings. But Magic Leap wouldn't let us show you any more than this.
Our research field is called computer vision and machine learning. It's part of the general field of artificial intelligence. So ultimately, we want to teach the machines to see just like we do, naming objects, identifying people, inferring 3D geometry of things, understanding relations, emotions, actions, and intentions. You and I weave together entire stories of people, places, and things the moment we lay our gaze on them. At its peak, ImageNet was one of the biggest employers of the Amazon Mechanical Turk workers. Together, almost 50,000 workers from 167 countries around the world helped us to clean, sort, and label nearly 1 billion candidate images. In 2009, ImageNet project delivered a database of 15 million images across 22,000 classes of objects and things, organized by everyday English words. In both quantity and quality, this was an unprecedented scale. As an example, in the case of cats, we have more than 62,000 cats of all kinds of looks and poses, and across all species of domestic and wild cats. Now that we have the data to nourish our computer brain, we're ready to come back to the algorithms themselves. As it turned out, the wealth of information provided by ImageNet was a perfect match to a particular class of machine learning algorithms. So here's a computer algorithm telling us the picture contains a boy and a teddy bear, a dog, a person, and a small kite in the background. Or a picture of very busy things, like a man, a skateboard, railings, and lampposts, and so on. Our computer algorithm is remarkable at telling us what exactly the objects are, like the make, model, year of the cars. We apply this algorithm to millions of Google Street View images across hundreds of American cities, and we have learned something really interesting. First, it confirmed our common wisdom that car prices correlate very well with household incomes. But surprisingly, car prices also correlates well with crime rates in cities or voting patterns by zip codes. So wait a minute, is that it? Has computer already matched or even surpassed human capabilities? Not so fast. So far, we have just taught the computer to see objects. This is like a small child learning to utter a few nouns. It's an incredible accomplishment, but it's only the first step. Soon, another developmental milestone will hit, and children begin to communicate in sentences. So instead of saying, "This is a cat" in the picture, you already heard the little girl telling us, "This is a cat lying on a bed." So to teach a computer to see a picture and generate sentences, the marriage between big data and machine learning algorithm has to take another step. Now, the computer has to learn from both pictures as well as natural language sentences generated by humans.
A man is standing next to an elephant. A large airplane sitting on top of an airport runway.
Of course, we're still working hard to improve our algorithms, and it still has a lot to learn. And the computer still makes mistakes.
Despite living abroad, I remain an often proud, sometimes appalled, member of what can now be called the Australian race. That is because social scientists reject ethnicity as a test for race. They say that the truly defining characteristic of a race is how its history has contributed to a distinctive moral outlook that they wish to preserve and carry into their future. The confidence of a race apart that began its connection with the world as an open prison and is now the best example in the world of the possibility of the reformation of the human spirit. Our early colonists took a harsh but yielding land, richer than most for primary industry and for mineral wealth, astonishing in its grave and shimmering beauty. They took it, of course, from an ancient people who'd occupied it for thousands of years before the birth of Christ, and who must be included in any vision of Australian values.
My thoughts go back to the times of the suffragettes and the pioneers of our women's movement. Women like Caroline Chisholm, Vida Goldstein, Jessie Street. From my generation, Elizabeth Evatt, Dame Beryl Beaurepaire, Susan Ryan. As Australia's first woman Governor-General, I have much to thank them for. We all do. It's because of them and countless others who fought battles in offices, schools, factories, hospitals, on our campuses, that we have the joy of celebrating the achievements of the women's movement.
You talked about it right at the end of your speech about that it's time for us to have the courage to start writing down and articulating Australian values. What would they be if they were written down?
Well, I have drafted a preamble, which I won't read off by heart now, but I do think it's possible to put in the preamble to the Constitution or to the preamble of the Bill of Rights a section that will be inspiring, that will remember our history, and that we will, that school children will be able to learn as they learn in America, as they learn in Canada, and so forth, to be proud of their history, to identify it, to identify the particular acts of heroism, of compassion, of self-sacrifice that have made the history of people they can look up to.